Matt Stafford had a very under-the-radar season this past year, ranking 16 out of 35 in expected points added, which if you don't know what that stat means, I have a video that breaks it down. It's super useful because it can be used to define how well a quarterback is playing, but also how well an offense or defense is performing also. So it's a do-it-all stat. In addition to being solid in EPA, Stafford was fantastic in quarterback rating, ranking 5th. His supporting cast, which is based on the PFF grades of his receivers and pass blocking, was ranked number 17. So you add that all together, and Stafford ranked as my 5th best quarterback in the league, which is incredible because he does not get talked about in that light basically ever. I think he was very clearly a top 10 quarterback, and as I mentioned, a top 5 quarterback, but he just does not get talked about in the same conversation of the Lamars or anyone else in that sort of territory. Someone else that should get talked about a bit more highly is their backup quarterback, Jimmy Garoppolo, because Garoppolo is about as good as you can do at backup. Though he was poor in Las Vegas, I will admit that. He's had tremendous success in San Francisco with a similar system to what Sean McVay will be running, so he is a good option if Stafford can't play, which hopefully won't be the case, but should Stafford go down, Garoppolo will be able to play at a reasonably high level. As we move to the supporting cast, if you're enjoying this video, make sure you give it a like, and also subscribe, as both make massive differences. With that out of the way though, the O-line for Los Angeles was alright. They were 21st in pass block win rate and 14th in run block win rate, which are ESPN stats. Compared to last year, they should be roughly the same, but perhaps a little bit improved. They returned 4 of 5 starters, with Coleman Shelton being replaced by Jonah Jackson, which marks a likely upgrade as Jackson has had a higher PFF grade than Shelton did in 2 of the 3 last years. The bigger reason for improvement, though, is that Joe Noteboom won't be getting as much snaps more than likely, which will improve how the line performs, as Noteboom really struggled last year. I don't think that gets talked about nearly as much as it should because people don't think too highly of the Rams' offensive line. I think Havenstein is basically the only name that's recognizable for most, and that isn't to say that they do have a premier line, but they have a better line than they showed last year because it was banged up. And again, Noteboom was just kind of thrusted into playing as a result of that. Depth-wise, they're solid, with Noteboom being a fine bench player because he's been solid in spurts through his career, so he's a solid option as a backup. You just don't want him to get consistent reps as a starter because then he really reveals himself as not being quite as high of a caliber player as you would like. Regarding their weapons, they are elite. Puka Nacua was incredible in his rookie year, ranking 6th in yards per game and 25th in yards per reception, which is really impressive that he ranked as highly in yards per reception as he did because he's not a deep downfield burner. He just is somebody that can win contested catches deep downfield, and is also somebody that's turning short to intermediate throws into good run after catch situations. So he's a highly efficient player in yards per reception, which is very nice. But where he is at his strongest is moving the chains with regularity, as evident by him being 6th in yards per game. That is fantastic stuff. He has no holes in his game, and that is personified by him also being one of the best run blockers in the league, which is very useful for Sean McVay, who gets a lot of his runs out to the edge and thereby does kind of require receivers to lay down good blocks. Somebody else who is a very good run blocker is Cooper Kupp. Kupp had a really strong year. He was 28th in yards per game and 45th in yards per reception, which really does speak to who he is as a player because he is more of a slot option than he is a vertical threat. So it would make sense that he would be more highly regarded in yards per game than he is in yards per reception. But Nacua is able to win deep downfield, and so too is Demarcus Robinson. There is a bit of a fall off between Kupp and Robinson, but Robinson was a wide receiver 4 for much of the year. He ranked 126th in yards per game and 25th in yards per reception. So he is somebody that can win deep downfield with regularity. He's just not going to be the most consistent mover of the ball. But you'll take that, and especially with Kupp and Nacua being so good in the short to intermediate parts of the field, Robinson fits the bill for what they need in a third receiver, and so too does their fourth receiver, which I'll get into later. Tyler Higbee remains a solid option at tight end. He's 18th in yards per game among tight ends and 11th in yards per reception among tight ends. So he's a solid contributor. He's not an elite tight end, but you could do far worse than him. And again, Higbee, he's a solid run blocker, so they are well insulated in the blocking department beyond their offensive line. Kyren Williams was fantastic this year. He ranked 10th out of 59 halfbacks in PFF grade, which doesn't even tell the full story because his raw numbers were out of this world good. He was on pace for like 1,700 yards, I want to say, in total, which is very rare air to be in. So he is a fantastic player, and I think the PFF grade does kind of not fully do him justice, but it's a good benchmark to say that, yeah, he's the 10th best running back if you look at him through something that isn't fully in favor of him. That's pretty good. Depth-wise, Tutu Atwell is a good wide receiver 4, as he could compete for a starting spot on most teams. Colby Parkinson is a really solid run-blocking tight end, too, that can catch effectively as well. And then Blake Corum is also a good backup running back, as he's basically a more fleshed-out version of Kyren Williams coming out of college. So they have depth across the board, and then they have star talent as well, which is about as ideal as it gets. Shifting to the defense now, at cornerback, the Rams are well set if they can remain healthy. I wouldn't say that they're elite, but they're definitely not in a bad situation. Darius Williams ranked 13th out of 127 corners in PFF grade, so he was really good and under the radar. He's undersized at 5'9", which is very undersized for being an outside corner, and he's awful against the run, but he's one of the better cover players in the league, which I'll take any day of the week for a cornerback. If you're bad against the run but great in coverage, sign me up. Trey White is they're going to be their corner 2. He was graded 81st out of 118 by PFF in 2022 when he last played significant snaps. That marks his floor, as he can be much better than that, but at the minimum, the Rams should be getting a starting caliber corner if he's healthy, so that's not a bad deal. And at nickel, Quentin Lake was ranked 38th out of 127 corners this year. He is a big nickel at 6'1", and you could replace that with Darius Williams, and it would make more sense with a 6'1" outside corner and a 5'9" nickel corner. Unfortunately, you can't do that, though. But Lake plays super physically. He was super solid in his first year of real play. He is good against the run, which is actually pretty useful as a nickel because you are kind of a hybrid of a linebacker and defensive back all in one. So that is actually pretty useful. And he's also super physical in press coverage and anything of that nature. He can get really into the receiver's pocket and make things difficult for him. At safety, they are alright. They're not fantastic, but they are pretty well suited. Cameron Curl ranked 50th out of 95 safeties in PFF grade. He's strong against the pass and alright against the run. He can play in the box or deep, so he supplies good versatility. And Russ Yeast is not so hot. He was graded 81st according to PFF. He isn't particularly good at either aspect of the game, as you could probably imagine with his ranking, but he did play 190 plus snaps at nickel corner, in the box, and at deep safety. So like Curl, he is versatile, which is very nice to have these chess pieces on defense because there's so many chess pieces on offense, especially in this division, with Christian McCaffrey being a running back / receiver, George Kittle being a tight end / receiver, Deebo Samuel being a receiver / running back. Yeah, it's nice to have these players that can play multiple positions. Regarding the defensive back depth, Cameron Kinchens is a solid backup safety. They drafted him in the 3rd, which is historically a fine spot to get safeties, as since 2019, the average rookie safety grades at a 59 PFF grade, which would rank slightly ahead of Russ Yeast, 57 grade, which you may be thinking, well, Russ Yeast isn't that good. That's true, but if your 3rd safety is a low-end starting safety, that's not bad. So I'll take that, and that's kind of the floor, I would say, for Kinchens, because I think he has the potential to be even better than that. I almost forgot to mention, they also brought in John Johnson, who has a very funny name, but I think he should actually be their starting safety opposite Cameron Curl, so he shouldn't be in the depth portion of this video, he should be in the starters portion. Either way, he marks a clear upgrade over Russ Yeast, as Yeast is just not really a starting caliber player. And Johnson, even though he had a rough year this past season where he was basically as good as Yeast, Johnson has the chance to be a much better player than that. On the D-line, Los Angeles is really missing Aaron Donald, but they still actually have a solid unit. Jared Verse was drafted in the 1st as an edge rusher, which on average gives you a rookie PFF grade of 65 since 2019. That'd be good for roughly 68 out of 122 edges, which may actually undersell Verse some, as he looks more pro-ready, at least in his build, than most edges do. So there's the potential for Verse to be even more of an instant starter, or high-impact starter, I should say, than that average grade would suggest. Opposite Verse is Byron Young, who ranked 34th out of 122 for edge pressures. He is not spectacular against the run. He's just alright in that regard, but he really has some upside as a pass rusher, as evident by being 34th in pressures. That's a really good number. He did benefit a lot, obviously, from playing with Aaron Donald, with teams focusing on Donald more than anyone else, but still being 34th is being 34th. That's a solid number for sure. Even better, though, than that is Kobe Turner, who was exceptional in year 1. He was 17th out of 142 in defensive interior pressures. In addition to that, he's a very solid run defender also, so he is a great player through and through. Lastly, for their starters, Bobby Brown didn't get any reps hardly, as he was behind Donald and Turner, but he was 28th in PFF grade, so he was great in his limited action. He's going to obviously see the field a lot more this year than he did last year because of Donald being gone, so it'll be interesting to see if his grade goes down as his reps go up, but I think he has the chance to still be a really high-end performer, as he was just so great in his limited action. As for the depth on the defensive line, Michael Hoyt is a mega oversized edge at 310 pounds. My one friend thinks they should continue the meme of him being a huge edge and just put him at linebacker and see what he does. I don't think that would be the most beneficial for him or the Rams, but it is funny to think that they could even play him at a more inopportune position. Either way, 310 pounds for an edge is massive. That's defensive tackle weight, and kind of a big defensive tackle in the modern era, if anything. Either way, though, Hoyt can get after the passer a bit and set the edge. You would hope at 310 pounds he can set the edge. He can struggle against wide zone, though, because he just isn't very fast. With that size, that makes sense. And he can kind of get out-leveraged to the outside as a result of that. But if it's an inside zone play, he can crash that run and just blow it up basically by himself with his strength. He was 55th out of 122 in edge pressures. And then moving forward, we have Brandon Fisk, who was drafted in the second also. Since 2019, rookie defensive interiors have a 56 PFF grade, which would make him the 87th best defensive interior out of 142 if he is average for his draft position. The Rams really like Fisk. I don't really see it with him quite as much, but the Rams do definitely like him. They traded up for him, and they're going to hopefully reap the benefits of him. Shifting to the linebacking room, the linebacking core for the Rams is up and down. Ernest Jones ranked 13th out of 82 linebackers in the PFF grade, which is awesome. He's been good in coverage some years, but this year he was great against the run and as a pass rusher and was a bit limited in his coverage role. But that sort of makes sense. Defensive backs are very finicky year to year in how they perform, and though linebacker is obviously not a defensive back position, it would make sense that coverage is holistically finicky for players because the schemes they're going to be running are going to be different, and the players they're going to be going against are also different. They might go after weaknesses differently. So it makes sense that he can be a little bit inconsistent in his coverage grades year to year. Either way, though, he's definitely somebody you want on your team because he is so good in the aspects he's strong in. Somebody who you don't want on your team, though, is Christian Roseboom. He was 79th in PFF grade, or PFF rank, I should say. As you could probably imagine, he really isn't good at anything. So he is definitely a weakness, which is not great because teams can just throw at him all day and have success. So that is one major issue the Rams have on their defense, is that there's a very, very clear weakness for teams to target. The depth at linebacker, too, is unfortunately non-existent, so Ernest Jones really has to stay healthy for their linebacker core to stay afloat. In all, Los Angeles is a very talented team. Stafford was elite last year despite having less than ideal protection for much of the season. The line should be better this year, though, and that could be major. Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp are about as good of a duo as you'll find in any team, and Tyler Higbee is a good tight end along with Colby Parkinson. Their running back duo should be elite too, and then defensively there's legitimately things to like. Their cornerback room could be a strength, and their safeties aren't ideal, but they're not a total weakness either. Their defensive line should be rather strong even without Aaron Donald. Their linebacker room has one stud at least. Unfortunately, though, they do have a very clear weakness at linebacker too, which teams will be more than willing to attack. But they do have a fantastic coach and have had success throughout the year, so I think that should keep up. Those are my thoughts. Be sure to let me know what yours are in the comment section, and also be sure to like and subscribe for more content.